Alright folks, so this is going to be the last part of our Gameology series on open world game design. If you haven't seen any of the previous parts of this series, be sure to check that out before we look at this one. So this is basically just going to be the conclusion of this entire series, and what I thought I'd finish out with is just, a list of my personal favorites in regards to, the open world genre. Now, before I say anything else, I want to state for the record, these aren't exactly what I think are the best games in the open world genre. Like any form of art, quality is subjective, so a lot of people might look at the games I have here and say that, so these are terrible examples of an open world game. And that's fair, and I should also state for the record, I haven't played every open world game. I'm actually missing a couple of big ones. I've never played Skyrim, never played Fallout 3, or really any of the big Bethesda RPGs, which do fall into my open world gameplay category. But yeah, so this is just strictly my own opinion, and if at the end of this, if you guys have any recommendations for open world games that you think I might like, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'm always looking for new games to play, and who knows, might make for good content for the live stream. But let's go ahead and get started. So, one of the first games we want to recommend is Grand Theft Auto 5. Now, speaking personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Grand Theft Auto. The idea of just going around and living the life of a criminal, it's just not something that terribly appeals to me. And it also doesn't help that a lot of the Grand Theft Auto series tends to not hold up very well, but it's hard for me to deny the fact that, the current Grand Theft Auto game, Grand Theft Auto 5, is actually really good. The mission structure in this game can be absolutely insane. The controls are silky smooth, there's tons of variety, the world is detailed. There's just so much to do in this game, and that's not even talking about all of the stuff that Rockstar has added to the online service. Grand Theft Auto 6 is due out here soon, and while that's not something I'm terribly excited for, it is something I'm definitely going to gamefly when it comes out, because I just know for a fact that Grand Theft Auto isn't going to fall into, the whole checklist design that I tend to dislike so much in video games these days. Sort of taken from a similar page as Grand Theft Auto is Sleeping Dogs. Now, one thing I really like about Sleeping Dogs is that it gives you a little more freedom as to how you want to act in the game. Yeah, you can still play the game as a reckless criminal, but given the fact that the whole premise of the game is that you're an undercover cop, the game gives you plenty of opportunities to, uphold justice. You can hang out with the cops, you can take on bounties, stuff like that, and that's only scratching the surface of what Sleeping Dogs has to offer. This is just one of the most diverse open world games I have ever played, and there were times when I would just completely ignore the story missions and just go do all the crazy stuff that the game asks you to do on the side. It also helps that the Hong Kong setting is super unique. The combat system is a lot of fun and constantly evolving too. There's some great RPG elements in this game. I would say the only real problem with Sleeping Dogs is that it's lacking a few coats of polish, which is why I don't think it ever reached masterpiece levels. Part of the reason this game didn't do so well when it came out was because it released right around the same time as the year's Call of Duty and Halo 4. So it basically stood no chance at the time. But the game is starting to get a decent following, which I'm glad to see because this really is a gem. Up next is a game that I'm sure is going to surprise a lot of people. Now, when I was talking about checklist design, I honed in on the Far Cry series big time because, that's probably the most famous example of that type of game design. But the thing about Far Cry is that it really didn't start using the checklist design poorly until after Far Cry 5. And even with Far Cry 5, they were starting to break up the monotony of it a lot. In fact, the way this game is structured in regards to how you approach the open world is actually really smart. Basically, there are different regions, and you have to go into these regions and get the attention of the lieutenant. So you basically just complete whatever objectives are in that region, and eventually the story will progress. So, and what's great about that is you can do basically everything in the game at your own pace, which is fantastic. On top of that, this game just has so many options in regards to combat. You can do vehicular warfare. There are planes in this game that allow you to perform aerial strikes on enemy encampments. The loadout is great. It's just a really good game, and I have no idea why Ubisoft decided to deviate so much from it for Far Cry 6, where they add a bunch of, really silly RPG elements that more or less just hindered the amount of customization that you could have in the game. If you wanted to have a certain build, you basically had to use very specific weapons. It just wasn't very good, but that's a story for another day. I think most of the Far Cry games are still worth playing, but Far Cry 5 is the one I recommend the most. Up next is something that's sure to be a sleeper for a lot of people, Prince of Persia 2008. Now, when this game came out, no one gave two shits about it for whatever reason, which has always amazed me because not only is this one of the most stunning games I've ever played graphic-wise, I really like how the game is structured. The game is basically an open-world platformer. Now, this game does suffer from a little bit of checklist design because you're basically doing the same thing through the entire game, but the main thing that makes it so much fun to play for me is just the sheer movement of the game. The way you make your way through the world, the beautiful dance between the two main characters, and how the world changes as you're making your way through it. It creates a good sense of progression. It's just so much fun to play. This is one of the games I always point to as a fine example of video games as art. Because while it does have issues gameplay-wise, and you could argue narratively speaking too, I feel like all that is just small potatoes in the grand scheme of things. Because, again, just so much fun to play. Such a beautiful game. I love it so much. Heavily underrated. Now, I'm sure you guys were expecting to see a bunch of superhero games here. The superheroes just make for great open world games because it allows them to basically tailor anything, all the different aspects I talked about in this series, to suit the character in question. And Hulk Ultimate Destruction is a good example of that. The main appeal of this game is just being granted the power of the Hulk and just being able to go buck wild in the city. It's so much fun just shoulder charging through traffic, bouncing across rooftops as they crumble beneath you, getting into brawls with the military, fighting villains, all that good stuff. It really amazes me that they didn't make more of these games. There are a ton of Spider-Man games, a ton of Batman games, foreshadowing by the way, but aside from the game based on The Incredible Hulk, there haven't been a lot of games based on The Incredible Hulk, which is insane for me to think about because this game really shows the potential of how good it can be. This is something that really needs to be revisited. I love Marvel Spider-Man, but when I heard they were making Spider-Man 2, I was honestly a little disappointed because the thought on my mind when I finished Marvel Spider-Man was not how great a sequel could be. It was just the excitement that, other Rockstar developers would take on Marvel characters. But we haven't seen that yet. The Wolverine game is still MIA. But here's hoping they do that justice. I want to see what Insomniac has in store for that one. Okay, let's go from Marvel to DC, and now we got the Batman Arkham games. Now, I always debate with myself on which Batman Arkham game I think is the best one. Batman Arkham Asylum definitely laid the groundwork, but, I struggled. I'm hesitant to refer to that one as an open world game. It's more of a Metroidvania, I would say, more than anything. But I feel like of all the games, Arkham City just does it the best. It was the first one that lets you, really, give you the full Batman experience, going around Gotham, stopping crimes, battling the Rogues Gallery. It had a great story too. The mechanics were great. It was just a really good game on all fronts. Batman Arkham Origins, I feel, is heavily underrated. I feel people are a little too critical of how the state the game was in when it came out. And Batman Arkham Knight, I feel, had similar issues, but may have leaned a little bit too far into checklist syndrome, as well as just, all the nonsense with the Joker in that game. But, there's just something about Arkham City that works. There's a reason people really love this game as opposed to, the other games in the series. But yeah, easily the best Batman game and one of the best open world games I've played. One of the big talking points of this Gameology series has definitely been the Yakuza series. When we talk about open world game design, like the big thing anyone always focuses on is, how big the open world is. But if the Yakuza series is a representation of anything, it's how unimportant that is in the grand scheme of things. Compared to just about every other open world game on the market, the world of Yakuza Zero is comparatively small. But the reason it's such a good game is because of how dense it is. There's just so much to do in the open world. I mean, it's side tasks, you got arcade games to play, and everyone tells me that Yakuza Zero is the best one. I definitely agree with that one. It streamlines a lot of the mechanics, it adds depth to it with the different fighting styles that you have, and there's just so much going on with this game. If you can only play one Yakuza game, this is definitely the one to start with. And it also helps that it predates every other game in the series up to this point. So yeah, that's definitely one that's worth checking out. Another big talking point would definitely be Infamous. This has always been, to me, the perfect example of how, basic game design is still important when you're making an open world game. Because the majority of the missions in this game are pretty much designed as if they were linear games, but you still have the freedom of an open world game. So if you want to mix up your strategy and use the immediate city to your advantage, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. It's not like in a lot of open world games where you step outside a certain boundary, you fail the mission, which is design I really hate. And on top of that, the controls in this game are just silky smooth. They feel powerful as hell. You just feel like you have the power of Zeus at your fingertips. You're constantly progressing, getting new powers, and there's plenty of replay value with the morality system too. Again, there's just no moments in Infamous where I feel bored. It's just a fine example of, an open world game that actually feels like it justifies being open world. One of the best games Sucker Punch has ever put out. And it just boggles the mind that Sony has not bothered to re-release this in any capacity. Enough with The Last of Us. It was not even the best game that was released on the PlayStation 3. You had lots of other good games on there. Just, give us something different, for crying out loud. While we're on the subject of that, I know I was talking about how I was disappointed with the announcement of Spider-Man 2, but it really cannot be understated how good Insomniac's Spider-Man was. When I first heard that Insomniac was taking a crack at a Spider-Man game, I was just on cloud nine. That's just the kind of thing I had always wanted to see, a Rockstar developer being given the reins for such an iconic character. Usually when, studios license out characters like this, they tend to go very cheap, multi-platform, just try to maximize sales for the lowest amount of money. But to see Sony actually get that license, put one of their best developers on it, and then throw a ton of money at it, it was just amazing, and the game's quality speaks for itself. I mean, it's fantastic. This is without a doubt the best Spider-Man game. It takes basically all the good stuff from games like Spider-Man 2, Ultimate Spider-Man, and polishes it to a mere gleam, while also just nailing every aspect of open world gameplay. Much like Infamous, a lot of the missions in this game take advantage of the fact that you are in an open world game and you can tackle objectives in a certain way, but it's also designed with basic game design in mind. It feels like everything in the game was designed around how Spider-Man moves, and it also justifies how big the game is too. Like I said, you have a fast travel in this game, but you will never use it because it's just so much fun to go web swinging around the world. I have played this game so many times. I actually played it again recently, and I still don't use the fast travel system. You don't need a fast travel system in an open world game. If you have to lean on that, that means it's boring being out in the open world, and that probably means you had no business making the game open world. So yeah, this is the standard for modern open world games in my opinion, or it would be if it wasn't for another one. Red Dead Redemption, baby. Now, a lot of people might look at me and say that I have a natural bias towards this game because I just love the Wild West. But Red Dead Redemption just immerses you in a very specific setting, better than just about any game I can think of. It's just fun to go riding out into the Wild West, taking down animals, being stopped by people, being ambushed. Like, you just really feel like you're in that setting. And again, it just uses all the elements that I think make up a good open world game. The world is just as big as it needs to be. It does not feel like there's any empty space in this game. The mission design, like all the important focal points in the open world feel like they were designed with fundamental game design in mind. I mean, just look at Fort Mercer here. Like, it doesn't use checklist syndrome. I mean, like, you do have certain checklists if you want to unlock certain costumes, but none of it is mandatory, and a lot of the time you just find yourself doing that naturally out of curiosity. Like, there's just so much content, the graphics are great, the story is beautiful. Like, whenever I talk to people about open world games, this is the one I always point to as the very best the genre has to offer. A lot of people might make the argument that Red Dead Redemption 2 is the superior game, and yeah, that is also a really good game, but there's a lot of annoying little changes that they made to Red Dead Redemption 2 that I feel ended up amounting to a lesser product. It's still a very good game, one I would recommend any day of the week, but I would play Red Dead Redemption over that in a heartbeat. And I remember when, the re-release for Switch and PlayStation 4 was announced, a lot of people were annoyed that, it wasn't a full-on remake, bring it up to Red Dead Redemption 2 status. But the thing is, you just didn't need to do that with Red Dead Redemption. Like, all they really needed to do is just, clean it up a little bit, maybe have it run at 60 FPS. Like, everything in this game just holds up, and it's well over 10 years old at this point. So yeah, Red Dead Redemption 2. If you are looking for a good example of an open world game and how it should be designed, this is the one I'm always going to point to. But again, that's just my opinion. If you guys know of any open world games that you think really represent the genre well, be sure to leave a comment, because I'm always looking for new games to play. And like, if you see it in the stream one day, you presented me a good one. So anyway, that's going to do it for Gameology on open world game design, guys. Next time, I think I'm going to start talking about another sort of interesting genre, but that'll be a surprise for later. So anyway, you guys have a good day, and I'll catch you next time.